looking around going, where the hell's all the good rock and roll? You effing killed it. That's where it is. You buried it on purpose with think piece after think piece about how it was terrible and molding young minds and turning people. I mean, you all turned into my parents. Play the tape backwards and you're going to kill your parents, man. I mean, everybody went crazy on all of this stuff. So I think it's a weird thing to say, hey, take this environment, the rock and roll lifestyle, and then make it accessible for a 9-year-old. It's weird there. It gets weird. You know, there are certain songs that I would expose a young child to is to get your feet wet in rock and roll. Here are the greats. You can listen to this. You might not be ready for that one just yet. Maybe not ready for that one just yet. That's kind of a parent's job. So you do got to be worried about not only what's coming from the stage, but is that artist more likely to have drug users in their crowd? Are they more likely to have people having sex in their crowd or whatever it should be? You are going to have to think about that. And nobody, and I mean nobody, gets dressed, spends $300 on tickets, $100 to park their car, brings $200 extra to pay for booze, and is walking in there going, man, I better make sure I take care of somebody else's children tonight. I think you just got to understand that as you're walking in the door. 7:45 this morning, I'm going to get you into Sonic Temple. Ironically, as we've been talking about concerts. We were talking about it because Doja Cat is like, look, man, don't bring kids to my shows. I'm not rapping about kid stuff. I'm up here talking about, all kind of stuff. Again, I said when you cleaned it up, it actually sounds worse, but she's rapping about semen and eating genitals and all kind of stuff, and she's upset with people bringing, kids to their shows. You'll hear this from artists. I remember, again, I know I lean on these guys a lot, and it's because, well, they were my favorite growing up. But Kiss went through this. Paul Stanley was like, dude, we looked out in the crowd, and before long we realized, like, oh my God, we've become something we weren't trying to be. This became Ringling Brothers, and like, that's not what we are. It's like, well, it is kind of what you were. Like, it's what you allowed yourself to come into because you wanted to make a bunch of money. And they wanted to change that. I don't think they did all that great of a job of it. Now, all of a sudden, they're old men, and they talk about how when they see 5-year-olds in the crowd, they love it. Of course, because they see their legacy being passed on moving forward, And we had been talking about that. And I kept linking it back to the Jerry Seinfeld conversation yesterday of like things being a little watered down. And it's because people want children, to be in all spaces now. Some people. Right? Inside that conversation yesterday, I had forgotten that It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is still on. They were listed in the top 10, comedies that are happening right now. And I was like, is that still on? I didn't even know it was still on, if I'm honest. You guys have let me know that. I appreciate that. But I think they kind of proved the point. They've had like 5 episodes yanked off the air because of some of the stuff they were saying. They're out there criticizing what Jerry said. It's like, this has literally happened to you guys. Apparently they're still on. I did not know that, so I thanks for that. I think, I'm mixing all these conversations together. It's probably a little confusing, and I apologize for that. South Park probably kind of that's the sitcom that still flies in the face of whether or not you can do that. And I think animated, you do get away with more. I think when we're talking about sanitizing the concert environment, that gets trickier, man. Because again, rock and roll is the opposite of no running. I mean, right? There's a reason why you like the music that you grew up with more than you like the stuff today. Because it makes you think about when you were young. And it makes you feel like when you were carefree. When the streetlights coming on were your only enemy. You know what I mean? It kind of takes you back to that place where you were young and you were going to change your life and you weren't going to end up like your parents. But you did. Right? And that's why we're angry. And so I'm like, right? And like, that's where all that comes from. As I'm always talking about that, and I'm right about it. Right? Like, there's a reason why that's the thing. Like, rock and roll is, and again, all things kind of fit into rock and roll once you start talking about attitudes and lifestyles. All things kind of fit into that. It's not necessarily appropriate for children. Now, what people think is appropriate for their kids versus, what my parents thought was appropriate for me versus what every other kid was allowed to experience on my street, completely different. Completely different. That was just not a thing. Like, right? Like, my parents were never going to take me to a concert. As a matter of fact, the first time I got to see my favorite band was 1988. They were touring Crazy Nights. And my friend Billy, his mom, took us. He was the only other Kiss fan I knew. All of our other friends were like, dude, they're over. What are you guys doing? Like, dude, these guys suck. What are you doing? And we were like, no way, man, Kiss rules. And like, we loved them. And so his mom was like, all right, I'm going to take you guys to the Richfield Coliseum to see the Crazy Nights tour. First time I ever saw them. Couldn't wait. All excited the whole way there. Didn't know what I was getting myself into. And when I walked into the venue and we got into our seats, I remember looking around and I thought to myself, this is why I'm not allowed to be here. Like, this right here, this is bedlam. I ended up buying the Paul Stanley tour short that on the back of it said, life is like sex. The more you put in, the more you get out. And I had to hide that in my room for like 5 years before I could wear it. But I had it. I made sure I had it. But there was so much going on at that show where it was, eye-opening. Because I was like, this is a world I don't understand. I don't have access to any of this anywhere. Like, and so I was a fish out of water in that. And I was just looking around like, look at these hedonistic animals, right? Like, and then, I grew up to be a hedonistic animal. So like that kind of happens. Sarah says, it's a lot. She says, you're right. This is about the artist. She goes, who you take your kid to see makes all the difference in the world. He says here, I took my daughter when she was just 9 years old to go see Joe Satriani. And she says, and she would be right about this, Sarah would be, that would be a very different experience if I had taken her to see Slayer. Yes, very different. As I can tell you from experience, I have seen Slayer more than once. I've interviewed them on a bus. I have bartended one of their shows. That is no place for a kid. No place. Those people, when that band plays, are animals. It's honestly, if you don't believe in evolution, go to a Slayer show. It's like, dude, look at this. It is insane what happens. It's also one of the loudest experiences you will ever have in your entire life. When they played the Agora, it was like, I was in the lobby bar and I was like, this is insanely loud. I cannot believe how loud they are. Also, I cannot believe how drunk their fans got. You go see a band like Slayer, Baroness, any band that pulls the engineer who has a beard down to his belly button, dude, they'll drink their faces off. All of those bands, dude, those guys drink their lives away at those shows. No place for a kid. Tough place to take a kid. 15, again, you're getting close to being able to drive yourself to the show. We're getting close to flirting with adulthood there. It's a different thing. 9 years old at a Slayer show, I think, is way, way too young. Now, you can take your 9-year-old. We're allowed to think differently. I'm not allowed to kick a kid out of the venue. I just think you got to understand, if you take your child into that environment, and then that environment is what the environment is, I don't think you get to act shocked. Especially if you're like, Slayer! Because if you're that much of a Slayer fan, you know what you're getting into there, don't you? Or at least you should. 7:45 this morning, let's get you into Sonic Temple. Disturbed, the original Misfits, Pantera, and Slipknot are your headliners each night. But dude, Clutch is playing that, a band I love. Baroness, who we just kind of talked about, they're playing. Mr. Bungle, Rise Against, Judas Priest, Harry King's band, as we talked a little about Slayer. God, a lot of good artists playing that. I'll get you in today, tomorrow, Friday. But today at 7:45 is when I'll pass those out. So I saw this yesterday and I chuckled at it the way a lot of people did, but I saw some people go way overboard about how this is going to destroy society, and I'm just not so sure that's what's going to happen here. Now, I do like to gamble. I'm an interesting gambler personally, just because I don't go crazy over casino games. I don't really want to go to a casino and play a bunch of blackjack. That's not, I'll go into the poker room, I'll play poker in the poker room, I'll do a little bit of that. I like, Let It Ride as a 3-card game, I'll play a little bit of that. But I'm not big into the casino games themselves. I like betting sports. I'm into the sports book, right? Having family who's lived in Vegas 30 years and having lived there, short periods of time in my life, but going there often enough, you really learn really fast. Dude, if you like the casinos a little too much, this ain't the place for you, right? So you kind of learn. But I do like to gamble. I do it all the time. I bet sports all the time. If I shoot pool with friends, we may gamble on that. The golf course, I mean, good God, the gambling that happens on golf courses. I mean, you can take the most straight-laced Ned Flanders dude alive. You take him to play golf, they're going to gamble a little. It's just kind of how it goes, right? Dave & Buster's now is rolling out an option for their loyalty members to be able to gamble inside their app. Now, they're very careful here not to use terms like bet and or wager. Like, they don't use those, right? But they're adding a betting component to their app, and I'm not on their app. I know we do have a Dave & Buster's here in town. I have not joined that app. But if you are a member of that app and at least 18 years old, you will be able to place real money bets on games at its more than 222 venues across North America. That I'm pulling from CNBC. So whether it's like the hot shot basketball thing, the Papa Shot thing, skee ball, or other games that they consider to be skill-based games, you'll be able to, I guess, wager on this. Now, again, they don't use those terms. And these games are skill-based. Dave & Buster's is not subject to the same regulations as gambling operations. Now, they say here the company stock is up over 50% over the last year. And it just seems a lot of people feel like this is another way to add to some of that, or it's just signs of the times. I'm not so sure there's a whole lot to be worried about here. Is it the avenue that we're worried about? Because you realize I can't speak for women. Men are competitive with one another. Like, they just are. Although I have dated in my life 3 women who were some of the most competitive people I've ever met in my life. So I think this could be true of them too. But you get people together and there's a score involved, I can beat you. Bet 20. 20 says you short it. Like, it's just part of life. It is. So if I'm sitting there next to my buddy, Friday night, we're playing Papa Shot at Dave & Buster's. First, it's like, dude, what are you doing here, right? Like, there'd be that. Beyond that, but if we're just doing that, and I say, 20 says I beat you, and I take out a $20 bill and I hand it to him when I lose, do we think that's society crumbling around us? Then why, if I can bet it inside their app, if I can wager on it inside their app for a prize? Again, I'm using these terms, they won't even use them. How is that society crumbling around us? This felt a little clutch the pearly to me, you know? It kind of gets us back into one of my sayings. It's like, I believe in your right, in your ability, in your freedom to do things, even things I don't think you should do. I don't think gambling's good for you. Like, I don't. But I do it. I do plenty of things that aren't good for me. I want you to be able to make decisions, even decisions I would not make or don't think are good for you. They're not letting 12-year-olds do this. It's 18 or over. Now, some of the gambling ads I have read for clients have said this at the end of them. Must be 21 or over and present in Ohio. I have been reading that phrase since sports gambling became legal in Ohio. Like, I have read a ton of those. And that disclaimer is normally at the end of them. So if you want to make that the hang-up, okay. If that's the hang-up, 18 versus 21, I could hear that argument a little bit more. But society crumbling around you because you can bet on skee ball, I'm sorry, I just don't see it. I don't. Now, I like to gamble. I do. We're going to play golf this weekend. And on the 10th hole, on that tee box, you're going to hear this from a group who's waiting to tee off behind us. Press. Every golfer just went, yep, I got to go. Because you know, that's what it is. You're not out there playing for the fun of it. You gotta put a little money out. You gotta gamble a little. Losers buy a drink in the clubhouse. Whatever it is, it's part of life. Now, having said all of that, I do have family who lives in Las Vegas, and they have lived there for 30 years. And I've told you before, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas isn't like that, did not come from a tourism bureau. That came from how much crime, how much desperation, how much sadness comes on the other side of gambling, and they don't want you to know it, so you keep getting on the plane to come over there and drop off your cash. That's where that phrase actually comes from. And then they were like, hey, we'll turn it into you cheating on your wife and not getting caught. Like that's literally where that whole thing came from. The downsides of gambling, I have seen it with my own eyes. It is sad. That is a sick addiction. It is. It's a pretty sick addiction. They're all sick once you get that far into it, you know? So you got to be careful. And there are gateway things. There are absolutely those. But those 18-year-old kids are going to be betting on Pop-A-Shot. Here's my point. If you're the kind of person who wants to bet and likes to bet, you're that person. This is giving you an avenue to compete. I'm going to call it competing with your friends. It does give you that ability. I don't know if that's necessarily going to turn you into the guy who needs to take, the Yankees minus 110 tonight. I don't know if that's going to do that. You got to be careful with the gambling because it's money. And to quote a movie I love, The Color of Money, money won is twice as sweet as money earned. And that's for sure true. Absolutely true. And that becomes something you end up chasing. And that can be a scary situation. I don't think skee-ball gambling turns into the dude being homeless on the side of the street. And you think of Dave & Buster's as a place to take your 9-year-old. So when you hear Dave & Buster's is going to let you gamble on Pop-A-Shot, you think it's going to be the 9-year-olds. They're starting at 18. If they receive enough pushback, my guess is, as they have bars in there, you may see this get pushed to 21 and over, and at least there I could hear an argument.